Well, now this is a topic that I really did not think we'd be bringing up at this time, but you know what? When La Presse goes out there and writes an article about it, I feel like it's our due diligence to go out there and see what the conversation is about. So, today we're talking about the Montreal Canadiens and the 2012, NHL Entry Draft. Y'all remember 2012 was the year that the Earth was supposed to end and everything was gonna go to hell and all that, you know, the apocalypse, Mayan calendar, whatever. 2012 was 10 years ago. I was in grade 7 at that time. And when it comes to the news as to how the 2012 NHL Draft went, you had yourselves a selection of guys that looked like this. In the first overall spot, you had Nail Yakupov going to the Oilers. In the second overall spot, Ryan Murray to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Third overall, Galchenyuk to Montreal. Fourth overall, Griffin Reinhart to New York. And fifth overall, you had yourselves Morgan Rielly going over to the Toronto Maple Leafs. There are a few picks afterwards that have been okay, some are great, some are bad, some are really questionable, but at the end of the day, this is the top 5 that we care about. Yakupov, Murray, Galchenyuk, Reinhart, and Rielly. The reason we're making this video is because earlier last week on La Presse, you had yourselves a piece published by Matthias Brunet going over how Alex Galchenyuk at 3rd overall was the bankruptcy of a hope that made people dream. Now, I don't fully understand what the translation is trying to say here, nor if this is entirely correct, but essentially this is a piece written and published on August 31st, 2023, going over Alex Galchenyuk. Now, if you've been following the videos and everything, you know what's going on with this guy. He is signed in the KHL. He is no longer in North America. He was arrested. It was really bad. But either way, offenses or not, Alex Galchenyuk still was not a pretty good hockey player, at least to the magnitude that Canadiens fans thought he would be back when he was a 3rd overall guy. Even with the Montreal Canadiens, to be fair, Galchenyuk did have a few years of pretty okay development. 30 goals in 2015-16, 44 points in 61 games played in 2016-17, and 51 points in the full season after that. Galchenyuk was not terrible. But of course, he never lived up to that 3rd overall status that he had had. And ever since he had left the Canadiens organization getting traded for Max Domi, things kind of took a lot more of a downturn. It wasn't good for Galchenyuk. But either way, this article goes out there and talks about how Alex Galchenyuk probably played his last game of the NHL at just 29 years old. He'll continue his career in Russia with SKA St. Petersburg. The article goes over a lot of what has happened with Galchenyuk the past little while, and then culminates by saying, hey, he is in the KHL with a 2-year deal. However, it talks more so about the history as well. In 2016, Galchenyuk, then just 21, was punched in the face at dawn at home by his possessive girl. I am not gonna read that. You can read that on your own time. Yeah, okay. This guy's had a few altercations that many of us probably won't ever experience in our lifetimes, especially with the way it's worded here in this article. However, the reason I'm making a video about this entire thing in 2023, this article that was published and talked about, is because of what exactly the article says at the bottom here. That even though Galchenyuk had a lot of inefficiencies and there were many errors with the way he developed, there are times when you should avoid placing all the blame on one organization for the failure of a top prospect. The player also had a share of responsibility. Galchenyuk had his demons. In the best case scenario, he could have become a top winger. However, the article then asks, what if Morgan Rielly had been chosen by the Canadiens instead? The guy taken 5th overall by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and a guy who is a very good NHL defender. He had 72 points back in 2018-19, followed it up by a few seasons that were not at 70 points, and then had a 68-point season in 21-22. Rielly also had 41 points in 65 games this previous year, and 12 points in 11 games as the Leafs went to the second round. Rielly signed on a deal that sees him making $7.5 million a year till the end of 2030, is a very good defender. And the article brings up, what if he had been chosen by the Habs? In a long interview with La Presse in 2020 in February, Marc Bergevin, then GM of the team, did not hide his preference for defender Morgan Rielly at the dawn of the 2012 draft. Yes, I liked him very much, but I'd just been hired on May 2nd, and my new staff really liked Alex Galchenyuk. I was with Chicago that season, and we were drafting later. We weren't wasting our time with Galchenyuk, who was probably going to be picked a lot earlier. And besides, he had hardly played that winter. I looked at our situation at center. We had David Desharnais, Thomas Plekanec, and Galchenyuk was considered a center. You take the office, you haven't seen Galchenyuk play, and you're going to force them to take another player? It starts a relationship well. I left to choose. In addition, I agreed. I knew that we needed center players, but I really liked Morgan Rielly. And this is a very interesting quote, because it essentially highlights that when Marc Bergevin was a member of the Blackhawks in that 2012-ish area, he did not do any scouting on Alex Galchenyuk. As he had said, Galchenyuk was supposed to be a top pick, and Chicago was not in that range of the draft in 2012, so they had no real reason to actually scout players in that range that were going to go super high. If you wanted context, hey, the Blackhawks actually drafted Teuvo Teravainen with their 18th overall pick in that same year. The pick after was Andrei Vasilevsky. So, for Marc Bergevin to say, hey, I liked that Rielly guy, that was a really good player whom I had my eyes on. But when I came over to this new team in Montreal as their GM, they liked somebody else. And I'm not going to be the new guy on the block and immediately take charge and say, nope, we're not taking Galchenyuk, a guy that was supposed to be a top pick, debatably first overall, a player whom you've all scouted because you guys knew you were going to be drafting in this range, so you did all your research, you have all your due diligence done, this guy's supposed to go in the top of the draft anyway, so why would I come out here and tell you to take the guy that was not supposed to be there? As a bro move, Marc Bergevin did a good thing. But with hindsight included, it's very easy to say, yeah, the Montreal Canadiens missed out on a number one defender by not taking Rielly. But of course, there is so much more context that needs to be established when you think about it that way, because if the Montreal Canadiens drafted Rielly and he made the team a few years later, and if he eventually became as good as he became on Toronto in Montreal instead, who really knows where the Habs would be? Where exactly would they have gone with their timeline? If you just want to cut and paste, that's easy. If you add Morgan Rielly to the team that went to the finals in 2021, they might actually have themselves a pretty good chance at winning. If you wanted to go even further, hey, let's say the Canadiens draft Rielly instead of Galchenyuk, and they don't trade away Sergachev for Drouin. If you have two other defenders on your team, behind Sherratt and Edmondson and Weber, then you probably win the cup then. Tampa Bay loses out, they don't have Sergachev, they have Drouin instead, for example, and let's say Drouin still takes the 2021 playoffs off. Like, you know, there are so many what-ifs here. But then again, if Morgan Rielly is as good as he is with the Canadiens in 2015, 16, 17, 18, how does that affect where the Canadiens finish in the standings? How does that affect the way they draft? Because I'll tell you this, when it comes to the centers for the Canadiens, yes, they drafted Galchenyuk in 2012, but that problem of centers still was there for the next few years. Does their draft strategy even change? Because, you know, with Ryan Poehling, with Jesperi Kotkaniemi, they were trying to get centers. Even in the Nick Suzuki trade, they wanted a guy to play center for them. So, the Montreal Canadiens have so many what-ifs and hypotheticals had they drafted Morgan Rielly instead of Alex Galchenyuk, the guy whom Marc Bergevin admits to actually wanting more in that time frame. But because he was the new guy in town, he did not want to impose on a team of scouts that did their work and had their eyes set on Galchenyuk. Marc Bergevin saying, hey, I didn't actually scout Galchenyuk because in Chicago we didn't really have a need to do that. I scouted Rielly instead and I really liked him, but I'm not going to go out there and say you should take Rielly over Galch. That's just the way it is. The questions are there in stone. What if the Canadiens did this move instead? What if they just listened to Bergevin and when he was hired they said, hey, who do you think should be the guy at 3? Not who you think we should draft based off of our evaluations, but who do you think, Mark, is the guy? If he goes out there and says Rielly, how does that change things? If Rielly is the guy, how does that change the next 10 years worth of Habs hockey? And if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, which I don't know why you're on this video if you are, but if you are, then hey, what are your thoughts on what would have happened had the Maple Leafs not had Rielly available to choose from in that 2012 draft? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.